Hi, I'm Oliver Corneli from the University of Cologne. I work for the ECMM, the European Confederation of Medical Mycology, where I serve as the guideline convener, educational officer, and at the same time I'm part of the Council of the ISHAM, the International Society for Human and Animal Mycology, a worldwide organization supporting fungal diagnostics and fungal treatment. And today I'd like to introduce you to the methodology of the World One Guideline program. This time it's on Candida Infections, and ECMM has teamed up with ISHAM to provide the evidence, best evidence and best support in these guidelines and guidance documents coming from this initiative. The Clinical Practice Guideline on Candidiasis has 6 coordinators, and they are given on the slide, and as you can see, they are from different parts of the world, from different UN regions. The guideline follows a definition for contributorship and for authorship, and I'll quickly go through these, although it's text only, but an author is an individual who meets the well-known ICMJE requirements for authorship. But then we added, in addition to this, some other points. One is you must have received this video training, and the authors will get a link to that video training and then report back to ECMM and ISHAM whether they have followed the video training, understood everything, and are willing to adhere to what is in this video. Then the 6th criterion is the responsiveness, because we have a very large author group throughout the world. 50 or more countries are being represented, and so we need rapid action so that emails are being answered within, well, a day or so, but not much more than that. The contributors are everybody who supported the guideline development, but who does not meet all of these 6 criteria given on that slide. The guideline methodology follows timelines. You may want to zoom in, but the slide set will be available online for the contributors and the authors, and of course, most of all, for the coordinators, and so we can follow whether we are on time. And from tomorrow onwards, we will select and identify the authors and contributors for the guideline, as you can see in the first line where it says invitation to potential contributors. We want to finish the whole process within a year, so by the end of the year we want to have the manuscript or manuscripts, if it's more than one, submitted to journals. With the methodology that we follow, it's key that people understand that we have 2 independent evaluations. For strength of recommendation is number 1, and then the other one is for the quality of evidence. We separate these 2, and that allows us to do something. It allows strong recommendations in the absence of highest quality of evidence. And some of these diseases are really rare, and we might not have highest quality evidence. But still we want to give a recommendation. And I have 2 examples for you that illustrate why that is important to us. So these 2 examples are as follows, and they are in the table. Number 1 is for a population of people on planes. That's a famous example, you might know it. We intend to increase their chance of survival when they jump off that plane. And then the intervention, the 3rd column, that we use to reach that goal that we intend is, the intervention is we give them parachutes, okay? So now we have 3 steps. Population is people on planes should, to survive when jumping off a plane, use parachutes, okay? That's very logical, but it's 3 arguments practically, or 3 parts in that argument. And we certainly, I guess, agree that there is a very high strength of recommendation. So it's an ASOR, strength of recommendation, that the quality of evidence is only a 3, because that has never been tested in a randomized clinical trial with, I don't know, 2 airplanes or something. So that has not been done, and we don't find a reference supporting this, okay? And it's just opinion that it's a good thing to wear a parachute. And that drastic and somewhat maybe awkward example, but I guess by now we know what's meant. So a more clinical example, the population of patients with fever, if we have the intention to diagnose phangemia, then we should, as an intervention, take blood cultures. That has never been tested, etc., etc. It's a very similar example to the airplane, and the strength of recommendation still is very strong. It's a strong recommendation to take blood cultures, but we only have a 2U quality of evidence, and that is in whatever journal we'll find something, I guess, that would support it. And I will come in a moment to the explanation how the quality of evidence and the strength of recommendations are defined. The strength of recommendation is expressed by a grade A, B, C, or D. A is a strong support for a recommendation, B a moderate support for a recommendation, C is only a marginal support. So a C3, for example, would be something that is opinion, or the expert think that's a good thing, but we don't really have evidence and we don't feel very strong about it and don't feel that it has a tremendous impact on the patient well-being, so that might end up in a C. And D is where we warn the user to not do this because it would be really a mistake, so we recommend against a certain diagnostic or therapeutic measure. The quality of evidence has 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. And 1 is easy, and it's like in, I guess, most guidelines that I have ever seen, it's evidence coming from at least one properly designed, randomized control, usually large clinical trial, and the primary endpoint of the trial should really address what is at the heart of that recommendation, supported with a level 1 quality of evidence. Then let me jump to level 3, because level 3 is, as already alluded to, evidence from opinions of respected authorities based on clinical experience, descriptive case studies, reports of expert committees, and so on and so forth. And why did I skip number 2? Because 2 has is everything in between. And it can be pretty diverse. And I'm not going to read it. The authors and contributors will have access to the slide set and can click through it on their own, at their own speed. But generally speaking, level 2 is a pretty much mixed box where everything fits in that is not 1 or 3. And since it's so diverse, what we did is we added and ASCMID has done so first, and then ECMM adopted that, and ISHAM as well. What we did is we added a additional information, a little letter to it, so that every level 2 evidence, let me emphasize, every level 2 evidence must come with a hint, where does that evidence come from? Because for 1 and 3 we know, randomized trials or experts' opinions. So for 2, we have 5 different settings. One is, it's a meta-analysis or a systematic review of randomized controlled trials. That would be a little R for review. Then we do have T for transferred evidence. That means, for example, I did a study or somebody did a study in adults. Now we want to say something about pediatrics, about children, and we have to transfer that evidence from adults if there was no study done in that other population, in my example, the pediatric population. Then we do have age for historic control as the only comparator in a study. U is even worse, so to say, or even weaker. That is, if there are only uncontrolled trials, so only series but no comparison done within the study, only comparisons with literature, for example. And then number 5 here is a little A for abstract. So we have something that is really important and we want to report and we want to incorporate that into the guideline, but it has only been published as an abstract. So that would be a little A, and hopefully by the time when the whole endeavor goes into print, it might have appeared, so we can get rid of the A and give some better reference than just an abstract. All the search strings that we use should, by the authors, be copied on that slide. There is, of course, room for considerations on patient involvement that might be specifically relevant in chronic diseases more than in acute diseases, because there are hardly any patient advocacy groups that could be could help us for the very acute and very rapidly fatal diseases. But we will make efforts to find patient advocacy groups in the context of Candida infections, and would love to involve them here. Literature access is relatively easy, so all PDFs that have been used for establishing recommendations should, practically the same day where you fill in the stuff into the slide set, be sent to Susanne Blosfeld at this email address here in Cologne. Susanne is the team assistant of my group, and she is very experienced now in helping with guideline developers. And all PDFs will be stored on a OneDrive, which is located with the German Telekom here in Germany. I think they're sitting in Frankfurt, these servers. And there will be a link provided that same day where we update it. A link will be provided to the authors and contributors of the guideline. The guideline methodology, so if you follow that link that will be sent to the contributors and authors, then you would find a picture like this with multiple folders, and in these folders would be the individual PDFs. We sort them by topic into these folders so that you have a selection only for the specific slide, the specific topic that you might be working on. Since we do not have track changes function in PowerPoint, we created a color code that mimics a track changes thing. And let me start with the red color. That's the color that the author would use, typing in data or text on one of the slides that I already shared or one of the following slides. Then the author should use red color. When sending in the slide set then to Susanne, what happens is that one of the coordinators will receive the slide set and will then check the information. If the coordinator agrees, maybe there's a typo or some other things to amend, then that information would be turned by the coordinator into blue color. That's new information for the whole group, and the group has not yet agreed on that information. Once the group agrees on what is written in that slide, the color would be changed to black, and that would be the final version of that statement, of that recommendation for a specific clinical setting. And of course, if there is new information surfacing, a new paper being published in the middle of 2020, for example, then if that's relevant for black lines, then we would reopen that and would turn it into blue again for another discussion within the group. Green is a color that is the color of the convener, so ideally only me and my team, we would use green, and sometimes it comes in a yellow box because that is something that we really want to draw your attention to. If there is any information that we need to share with all the authors during the process, and that is what we would do. There's a specific way how a slide should be finalized once everything has been converted to black, or that would be the goal. That information is given on that slide. I'm not going to read it, but you may want to go through it. It's the details on how exactly we should proceed when we want to finalize a slide, which means to finalize the information and the recommendations on a topic. The manuscript writing group follows specific rules. As you would imagine, the writing group will be created by the coordinators and the convener. So everybody who contributed significantly up to then and is willing to write parts of the manuscript will likely be invited to form the writing group. We will split the whole exercise in different parts, and then everybody would contribute a specific part with a already then determined word count. That should be the maximum word count for the individual chapters. It's all given on that slide here. We need contributors from multiple different disciplines, clinical and lab disciplines. And let me quickly go through. This is not yet populated, but during the next days until mid-February, we will fill these slides, and that will be my task to fill the names in of the contributors or potentially then authors if they really commit and work on the whole process. So the disciplines we need: clinical microbiology, of course, pathology, radiology, infectious disease experts, pediatrics, hematology, intensive care, dermatology, pharmacology, surgery, of course. And it might be, I just said surgery, but it will be different surgeons. It might be pediatric surgeons, it might be visceral surgeons or thoracic surgeons, neurosurgeons. So we will have quite some input from surgery in this guideline, as we had in other guidelines, mucormycosis, for example. And then we have other, because I might have omitted some disciplines, some experts that we need, and we will add new slides then if there is other disciplines coming on board. Here we can just park ideas that we think should be addressed in the introduction. So sometimes while you work on something, you get the idea that, well, this is really important, I don't know where to put it, so this would be a nice place to park it so that a brilliant thought is not lost. We will address epidemiology by region, and information goes on this slide. We will have world maps, at least one, maybe multiple maps. They will be done by the Cologne team. Daniela Seidel and our statistician John Salmonton Garcia will be the ones working on this, and with input from others, of course, but they will be responsible to finally draft the world map for discussion. Recently published guidelines in the field of Candida, Candidemia, invasive candidiasis, mucocutaneous, acute or chronic, all published guidelines that are recent should go on this slide. Infection control measures, just with this once more leading from left to right through that table. We do have a population, we need to fill that population, who's meant. What does the recommendation that will be in that line really refer to? What can we reach with the, and what is our intent? What is the intervention to accomplish that intention and to help a patient in that population? What for these three steps is the strength of recommendation? What is the quality of evidence? What are the key references supporting that quality of evidence? Where is that evidence published? And then we have the last column, the comment column, which will be used sparingly, I presume. But if you, for example, fill in a clinical trial, then you might say n equals whatever the number, so that the reader gets an immediate idea of whether it's a randomized clinical trial with 20 patients or with 700 patients, which might have a different meaning for the user. Following the infection control aspects, there will be a large part now on diagnosis. There is clinical diagnosis, imaging studies, microbiology, several aspects of microbiology. One is the conventional methods, followed by antigen detection, followed by antibody detection and molecular techniques. Species identification, of course, is a very important chapter here, and that allows us at the same time then to go for susceptibility testing, histopathology, echocardiography. There's a lot to say about echocardiography, I guess, specifically with candidemia. Certainly in addition to patients with endocarditis caused by Candida. That would be two aspects of what I would expect on this slide. We will see where it finally fits best. Ophthalmoscopy, and then diagnosis other, because there might be other techniques that just don't have a individual header for a slide, but we can add more slides as appropriate, and as we did with all the other guidelines that are currently running or have recently been published. If we do have all the diagnostic information, then we can draft a flowchart for settings where all options are available. So you do have a pathogen that you isolated and it grows in culture media, and you can test this. That would be one prerequisite for quite some assays that would be part of that diagnostic flowchart. At the same time, it might be the just plain availability of PCR techniques or some other tests that might not be available in each and every setting and country and hospital. So we do have the all options available flowchart. If there are not all options available, then we will address these settings and clinical situations in one or more additional flowcharts that would go on this slide, and we would clone the slide if we need more than one. Infectious diseases consultation is of course another aspect, and you expect now that it becomes more clinical and leaves the lab and goes into clinics, and then they have their tight interactions, of course. So ID consultation, all the info would go on this slide. Antifungal stewardship is a very important topic addressed here. And then we come to a large treatment part, and that would start in chronological order with prophylaxis, fever-driven treatment, diagnosis-driven treatment, targeted treatment, where you know what you treat. And we would separate first-line treatment from information of the duration of first-line treatment, and then separate from step down to oral treatment and from second-line treatments or salvage treatment settings. Of course, surgery is part of treatment as well. And then there might be other treatment aspects that are not covered by the previous 10 or so slides, and they would go on this one, and we could clone, as always, the slides. For the children that are affected by Candida, we do have separate slides, and that is for treatment. Targeted first line is this slide, salvage treatment is another slide, and other. And that is of course only 3 slides on children, but we will have more slides, and the pediatrics in the group will clone the slides, and so that they keep different aspects separate on different slides. Then we come to the disease specifics. There is candidemia without organ involvement, plain candidemia. That might be one of the rare occasions where we really have A1 recommendations, so that might be a comparably easy to fill slide. Then we do have the catheter-related bloodstream infection and catheter management aspects, and the non-catheter related intravascular infection as a separate issue, and device management within that part. Invasive candidiasis of the central nervous system, meningitis, abscess are the 2 big chapters, and then there might be other aspects. Again, we would create new slides, the authors would do so. Ocular involvement as a separate topic, endocarditis, intra-abdominal abscesses, peritonitis, certainly a separate chapter, hepatosplenic, so that goes in the direction now of chronic candidiasis, hepatosplenic or other chronic candidiasis, urinary tract infection, bone and joint, which almost always is chronic or needs long treatment periods, and again, other aspects, other organs not covered so far. There is, of course, with treatment, there is therapeutic drug monitoring to be discussed, and that would be levels and concentrations in either blood samples or other materials, CSF, ascites or other liquids, maybe even TDM, or measuring levels in tissue. We might go there in the future in specific settings and certain clinical situations. Moving over to the mucocutaneous candidiasis, oropharyngeal, esophagitis, gastrointestinal, that'll be an interesting one. where I expect lots of controversy, but we will see. We have a large group, so we will have consensus in the end, I guess. Vulvovaginal candidiasis, and we will have, with so diverse treatments, we will have a variety of treatment paths for both, for those who have all options available and for those settings where there are not all options available. I expect a lot of charts here, a lot of flow diagrams that finally should help so that you just go by the diagnosis and can pick the right path and see whether you already did everything that's given on that path. And coming to the last part of my presentation, we want to address in the guideline the most important unmet needs. So what is the things that we need to address next that would more or less be maybe the same table, but we would transition to exactly immediate next research questions, likely 5 questions that should be addressed and can be addressed next to close these gaps that are still there if it comes to Candida and Candida diseases. That was my final slide. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't completely exhausting, but it's a very broad approach. We have more than 100 authors, I presume, for this guideline, but there is so much to do that it's good that we have a large group and there are people from all over the world and all different disciplines and all kinds of different settings, and I hope that we will accomplish and help the scientific and medical community and ultimately the patients with our recommendations and with a comprehensive approach as we are now taking it. Thank you very much.